Rick, nice to meet you.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, good to be here.
Well, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one because we're going to go through your journey of, uh, I hate to say the word, losing your Bitcoin, which
Yeah.
happened whilst you were in El Salvador. But I'll let you tell the whole story. That I mean, I know you and I we. It's weird because I'd forgotten we'd even DM'd before when I was trying to buy a secondhand car for Bitcoin, and you were
Yes.
straight in my DMs, and it didn't work out for whatever reason. Not enough seats, I don't think. But then when I saw your announcement on Twitter, I was straight into your DMs to see if there's any way I could put you in touch with anyone, or I think I got you in touch with the Bitcoin Way guys just to try and see if there was any way that there was, a possible way to save what had happened. So why don't you get the listeners up to speed with like who you are, what you've been doing up until now, and that fateful day in El Salvador where you dropped that video tweet.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, where to start really? I guess a bit of context and background is probably good to sort of explain, well, how did we end up being in Bitcoin in the first place, and so early as well. So I mean, really, the bottom line is it's all down to my dad, right? So he's been a software engineer for basically all of his life, right? 50 odd years. He started life working on IBM System 360 assembler. So this is going sort of way back. And then he worked through most popular sort of development languages like PHP, C+, and all this sort of stuff. And even today, he's very capable. So he's playing with Node.js and Docker, and I mean, one of the tweets we put out is we had actually been working on a Lightning app and stuff like this. So like, we're always playing with stuff. So the story sounds a bit weird, right? Like, why is your 68-year-old dad looking after the Bitcoin? It's meant to be the other way around, right? Like, I'm meant to be convincing the boomers. Um, but the reason we just got really lucky, right? If there was first of all, he's really into tech, right? So I'm not a techie, but growing up in that household, I know a little bit about a little bit and always had an interest. Then at university and stuff, I did a bit of economics as part of like a bigger sort of business degree and stuff like that. Um, and also, my dad is a fascinating guy, right? Like he always knew before Bitcoin came out, he knew about the problems with central banking and fractional reserve banking. So since I was a boy, right, like I've had this stuff drilled into me, right, that the bankers are criminals and yeah, like I wouldn't say that we were like expert economists, right? Like I couldn't take you through all the intricacies of how the fiat system works, but we know enough to know that on balance, this doesn't add up. You have one group of people printing money out of thin air, and the rest of the people have to work for it. So,
Do
we
do you
understood
remember
that
what
inherently.
sent
So
him down that rabbit hole in the first place? Did he ever tell you? Like, did he read a book, or did another friend tell him, or like any clues as to why he was digging around in that kind of area?
do you know what? It's a good question that I don't know the answer to. I'll have to ask him like what sent you down this path. I think that the answer is probably along the lines of he's just an extremely naturally curious person. I mean, interestingly, that's probably born from where he started in life. He was actually adopted because he was born outside of wedlock in Ireland back in the day, and he ended
Mm.
up in one of those sort of workhouses and stuff like that. And then he got adopted, brought over to England. Uh, Unfortunately, his adopted father died when he was about 10 years old. So, he's basically dragged himself up from his, by himself and sort of done quite well. And I mean, I'll give you an insight into him. Like, he's the sort of guy, if I saw an air conditioning unit break on his property, right? He doesn't call someone out. He takes it off the wall and goes and gets a soldering iron out and starts playing with it, right? So he just gets interested in things, and then once something's grabbed his interest, he'll read 20 books about it. So yeah, I would imagine he just sort of stumbled across it and thought, yeah, do you know what? That makes sense to me. Thinks for himself, sort of thing. so yeah, then Bitcoin comes along, right? And we start reading about it and talking about it. And God, I was in my early 20s or maybe mid 20s at the time, and for months, literally months on end, we would call each other every night when I got back from work and spend hours just your brain exploding about, what does this technology mean? We've never seen anything like it. I mean, this was even before Ethereum launched, right? Which, by the way, I think is interesting. I think there's one reason we managed to hold Bitcoin for so long and not lose it. You hear all the stories, the guys who had thousands of them, and then they start shit coining and all this sort of stuff. We kind of avoided that. We were really lucky because when we started studying Bitcoin, it was the only thing to study. So that made us really fortunate. There were no distractions, Web3 and NFTs and all this crazy nonsense. So it allowed us to just explore that world on its own. And then when Ethereum launched, it was quite obvious to us. We thought, well, how can you have a founder that then launches tokens for sale? This isn't the same thing. It's not the same model. So we kind of bypassed all that.
And what were
Um,
you doing at that point? What was your day-to-day job?
Okay, so I mean, yeah, I never have taken sort of the traditional path through life, and neither has my dad. He's worked for himself for 30 odd years, and I wanted to pursue the same thing. So not long after uni, I went and started a digital agency with some friends. We were making mobile apps and websites and this sort of thing. Uh, then after that, I had a couple of other businesses. So I got involved quite heavily in the cannabis industry, which is that's a whole other story. I'll give you the very, very short version, which is why I was interested in that in the first place, which was my grandfather actually had hemophilia, which is quite a debilitating illness. Your blood doesn't clot because it doesn't have hemoglobin. It's like a hereditary thing. And the interesting thing about him was, because of his illness, it's lifelong. He was on tramadol and all these painkillers for his whole life, right? And these opiates, which is really, really not good over the long term. Um, and he started smoking cannabis one day, and it really, really helped him. I mean, my mum was crawling the walls, right, thinking, "Oh my God, what are you doing? These are drugs," and that sort of thing. But it changed his life in really quite spectacular ways. So I always knew there was some interest in there. Uh, and most recently, yeah, I was running a skincare business where we were infusing certain extracts from the cannabis plant because we discovered that it really helps with things like psoriasis, which is a really debilitating disease. I never actually realized beforehand how bad that can be for some people, unable to walk because it's on their feet. And yeah, I mean, top tip, even if you go and get some hemp seed oil from the supermarket, it's worth trying on your psoriasis. We had some pretty amazing results. Um, but unfortunately for us with that business, we launched actually at the same time as COVID was launched. And we had a really good start. We picked up some really good business and stuff, but we were too small to weather the storm. So unfortunately, we sold on to a larger cannabis company and we had to sort of call it a day. Um, and since then, man, the latest thing that I've been up to is well, look, we had a pretty solid Bitcoin position, right? So I was sort of looking to pursue some passions more than necessarily money. This was never about the money for us. It was always about the freedom. We're really quite independent people. So one thing I'd always wanted to learn was woodworking, right? It's always been something that I felt I'd never get the time to do it because life's so busy and we're working. So I've spent sort of the last 12 months working on that. And yeah, and then fast forward to El Salvador and us finding out that unfortunately, life's going to get a little bit different in the next few months and years. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So let's get to the moment then, and the the infamous video tweet, and then we can talk about what happened after that, I suppose. But yeah, what you were in El Salvador? What were you doing over there? Just making the pilgrimage? What was going on? There was a conference, right? Were you there for that?
Yeah. So I mean, this is it's so funny to recall it, right? Because the story is almost like so tragic. Someone had to have written this because after holding Bitcoin for well, basically 10 years, a whole decade, me and my dad thought, you know, it'd be fun. You know, all these posts coming out of El Salvador, for 10 years, we've been thinking, God, what are the implications of the world moving to a Bitcoin standard? And we'd pontificated about it for years. We'd had endless conversations, and we thought, well, now we can go and have a look, right? We can go to El Salvador and see what happens when you move onto a Bitcoin standard. So yeah, it was kind of this was a trip of a lifetime. It was a shared passion between father and son. We were going to go on a little jaunt together and all this stuff. You know, it was meant to be this sort of really special occasion. And yeah, we went to the Bitcoin conference. We did 3 days there. That was really fun. Got to meet some great people, especially like, you know, meeting people that you've spoken to online but never face to face is always really fun. And yeah, on the last night of the conference, we went back to our Airbnb in San Salvador, and yeah, we were fired up, man. You know, we've seen all these talks. We're like super excited. We've been buying stuff like pupusas and all this with our Bitcoin. And I mentioned that we'd been working on an app, right? And it's like nothing serious, just a fun little project. And yeah, we needed to fund a Lightning channel to start doing some testing and send some transactions around. So my dad goes to check his laptop and the stack of Bitcoin and make some transactions. And well, I don't want to swear too much on your podcast, but one word came out of his mouth. You know, I'm just pottering around this flat, and he just says, "Fuck." Right. And I think nothing of it. I think like, you know, maybe the laptop's died or something stupid, right? And I say, "Oh, you know, what's up?" And yeah, his next words are, "I've been hacked." And yeah, I mean, I try and recall how I felt in the moment so that I can sort of explain to other people, but it doesn't feel real, and you feel this like huge stone just land in the pit of your stomach, you know. And I mean, I can even feel it a little bit now. Like, you know, your hands start to shake, and you feel that adrenaline like rush through your body, and your mind just goes a million miles an hour, you know? And you're thinking, this can't be real, this can't be real. And yeah, you know, we're looking at these address balances, and they're reading zero. And first comes like the bargaining stage.
Mm.
So, you know, whether this is part of the story or hugely relevant, we don't really know. But he bought a new laptop in the last couple of months, and he remembers he did actually like move some files around because he has a business that he runs, and he wanted to segment some stuff and move some stuff around. And he thought, oh, you know, maybe did I move it to another a wallet address? You know, is this am I being silly here and everything's actually fine? And so there's like a good half an hour of just, you know, scrambling around, pacing up and down while I'm sort of waiting for him to sort of look into that. And then it struck me, you know, you start slowing down, your brain starts working. And I said, hang on a minute, you know, go into that wallet and go and send me the transaction IDs, which he did. He fires those across on WhatsApp. So I head over to Mempool Space and start plugging in the transaction IDs. And that's when you know, right? Because I'm looking at these transactions, and you know, there's transactions for 3 Bitcoin going over here, 6 Bitcoin over there, and you know, this definitely wasn't us. There's multiple transactions. The Bitcoin just gets scattered to the wind, basically, and then it's really real. Then it's really real. So yeah, that was pretty much the story of us finding out, and yeah, it's wild, man. You know, especially being so far from home and thinking
Mm.
like, you know, we just want to dive on our laptops, we want to check our setups, we want to do all this stuff, but we're miles from home, we're miles from family, and all this sort of stuff. It was visceral, right? That's all I can really say.
Oh, yeah, I remember the tweet, man. It was and yeah, it's awful when this happens. Um, had the Bitcoin moved that day? Had you discovered it that day, or had it already gone a couple of days beforehand, or you don't remember?
Well, this is the crazy thing, right? The wallets were actually swept on September 12th. So this is almost a full month before we found out and tweeted. Um, and people find that strange, and I get why, right? But you know, understand that like over a 10-year span, like, I would use Bitcoin like day to day. This wasn't my entire stack at the time because that was my savings, my pension, my future. I'm never touching that. I mean, I know, on Twitter, everyone, oh, never selling, never selling. Yeah, I was never selling. I'd held this stuff for 10 years. I knew exactly what I held. I knew what it's really worth. I know that it's massively undervalued for what it represents. So yeah, you'd have to really try and pry this stuff out of my hands. So yeah, I had other Bitcoin that I'd play with day to day, like I'd buy stuff, never significant amounts, and all that stuff. So we would just never look at it because over a 10-year time period, you're not checking it every day. So yeah, that's kind of that's the mad thing is we went to El Salvador. We'd already had our Bitcoin stolen. It's already long gone. And it's pure serendipity that, we would even interact or look at those wallets while we're in El Salvador. It's kind of, and that's why I feel the whole thing feels like some sort of Netflix special because the timing of it and the situation is just so bonkers.
All right. So I can't imagine you slept very well that night. You get up the next day. I think was it the next day, and then you put the message out on Twitter. And to me, it was much more of a warning rather than any other kind of message. It was more like, guys, don't fuck up. Don't do what we've done. Double check your cold storage solutions. Make sure you're doing things properly. Learn from our mistakes.
That's 100%, man. I mean, what's weird is, people might notice I wasn't a prolific tweeter before this sort of thing kicked off because hey man, I was busy living my life. I've been on Bitcoin Twitter for 10 years, right? Like I've seen every variation of the story of what central banks do and this sort of thing. And I was sort of drifting away a little bit because I wasn't getting as much new information as I'd necessarily want. And there's other things to pursue in life as well, right? So um, yeah, I don't know what made me tweet because I'm really quite a private person, right? Like I don't interact on social media very much. I'm not for me, there's only one currency, it's Bitcoin. Likes don't really pay my bills, and I'm not super interested in being an influencer. Like I don't want to be an influencer. That's not my sort of thing. So I couldn't tell you why I tweeted it. I think because in the moment, you realize that it's just me and dad sitting in this Airbnb in El Salvador, miles from home, and we're just in this little bubble experiencing this crazy thing. And there's only one group of people that will ever understand what we're going through. So again, I couldn't tell you why I made the decision to tweet it, but I did. I guess partly, yeah, I want other people to think, oh crap, is my security good enough? But also, just everything was happening so quickly it just felt like a way to reach out and maybe get more understanding. And man, the thing I can say to other people, if you do get hacked or you lose your Bitcoin to some stupid, maybe you listen to an advert on a podcast and you end up in a stupid yield farming Bitcoin program and you loan it out and you lose all your Bitcoin, or maybe you get hacked or whatever. I would encourage everyone to just share those stories. Because we ended up so much better off because I shared it. Um, I couldn't. It's funny to me now, right? Because Bitcoiners are always called toxic and all this sort of stuff. And hey, look, 3 to 5% of the comments were pretty hilarious and pretty aggressive, right? But
What were those
95% of the
negative ones? What were the negative ones saying?
oh man, there's one on Reddit that I came across, and I wish I'd have saved it because they deleted it now. But there's some people who definitely have their tinfoil hats on too tight. They were saying that it's very obviously staged and that I'd made it all up. And that I was even playing on the fact that my dad was involved to make all the other Bitcoiners who are dads feel sorry for me so that then I could grift and get some sort of donations and stuff. it's all pretty funny, right? Because like, could you imagine if I wish I was creative enough to come up with a story this crazy, right? And other people, you just get all that abuse, 10 years in Bitcoin, how could you be such a moron? How could you store your seed phrases online and all that sort of stuff? Um, all I would say with that sort of thing is like, trust me, pal, when you've lost $1 million, like you could say anything to me, you're not going to make me feel any worse. So that sort of stuff bounces off me. It really, really, really isn't a problem. But the main story is that 95% of people that reached out either in the DMs or, I want to shout out Ergo BTC, who I think, is associated with the guys at Samurai Wallet and stuff like that. Man, these extremely talented people went and, just gave us loads of their time. They're off, chasing the transactions, trying to help us understand where it's gone. Is there any possibility of getting any back or identifying who did it? And these people don't have to give up their time for free. They're extremely busy. They got their own things going on. But by and large, yeah, the Bitcoin community was just incredible. And it's weird, right? Like I don't mind admitting this, I didn't really get massively upset about the Bitcoin loss, but that outpouring of support and love and just generosity and people empathizing with you, I've never really experienced something like that on that scale. And that was the thing that would choke me up more than anything else while I was in El Salvador, was just how nice people were being. I mean, there's one guy, and again, I'm not going to name people because that I'm sure they'd rather stay anonymous. But one guy stayed up for hours just DMing me. We had a huge long chat about life, about Bitcoin, about how to bounce back from difficult things. I mean, you already know this, Daniel, right? Bitcoiners are some of the most interesting people you're ever likely to meet, right? And we're talking about philosophy, stoicism, all this stuff. Yeah, I could never tell you like how it would have been had I not shared it and how I would have felt. But I'm absolutely positive that having shared it and spoken to people has helped a lot with processing it, dealing with it, and understanding it. So yeah, it was wild.
Yeah, pretty amazing, mate. When we do band together, there is some incredible power. When we're all pushing in the right direction. Did anybody come up with any solutions along the lines of, any kind of breadcrumbs where it was going, or like anything at all that you could work on and kind of try and retrieve, or at least, file criminal charges, or what was the next step?
Well, so where it all started was mainly the Bitcoin community. So I mentioned Ergo BTC, and there's some others who started doing chain analysis and firing me information, and creating these graphs that would show you where all the Bitcoins flowed. We discovered things like quite a lot of the funds were sent to Wasabi coin joins, which obviously makes everything a bit more difficult once the coins have been mixed. And look, I'm no expert on coin joins. I've played with them like most people, but um, I can't confirm or disconfirm this, so I don't want to put misinformation out there. But from my understanding, one of the coin joins, one of the inputs to that coin join was 12 and a half Bitcoin of ours or something. Now, I can't absolutely verify this, but it sounds like that's an unusual way to go about coin joining with such a large input. Some of the outputs become very large as well, which it kind of makes sense to me, would maybe make it easier to try and unpick. So, we've had some success trying to like follow where those transactions have ended up. Um, Weirdly, some smaller amounts of Bitcoin also ended up at KYC exchanges, which is kind of fascinating to me, right? Because I mean, there's lots of unknowns, but if you think of it this way, someone who's talented enough to sort of access our systems and brute force our passwords, and is then capable enough to go and coin join and mix coins. It seems unusual to me that they would do something as basic as go and interact with a KYC exchange. But in some cases that's what's happened. Um, so there's multiple exchanges. I think we saw some funds go to OKX. We saw some go to fixed float. We saw some interact with Binance and stuff like this. It's quite unusual to see how it all happened. So the place I'm in now, and some things I can say and some things I can't say, right? Because there's like an active investigation with the police. Um, what I can say is I ended up interacting with police in different jurisdictions, and it was kind of wild, man. Like, I'll tell more about this later down the line, right? But yeah, interacted with different agencies in different countries, all trying to help figure out what's going on. And yeah, I mean, I know chain analysis and stuff isn't popular in the Bitcoin community. And hey, look, I'm actually, despite what happened, I'm very pro privacy and I like coin joins and I like all this stuff. So I'm just relaying the information. But the authorities, they're pretty capable. They're pretty capable in what they can do and how they can follow funds. And they try and unmask IP addresses and all this sort of stuff to try and follow you. I think a lot of Bitcoiners, and I would include myself in this, probably underestimate what the state is capable of in terms of tracking the blockchain, which, I mean, it makes sense, right? It's a public database. So, and they have endless amounts of money, as we know. So, to think that they wouldn't have this capability is yeah, a little naive maybe, or whatever. So anyway, the story we're at now is, we're going through the process now of yeah, just waiting. We're in a little bit of a black hole, right? We know that they've been able to speak to the exchanges and get some information about who owns those accounts. But I'm not allowed to know anything about those people for obvious reasons, right? They don't want to turn me into a vigilante, and a suspect is not, it's not bang to right? A suspect could still be innocent. And the other thing, I mean, again, this is speculation on my part, but I would imagine that those exchange accounts were probably not owned by the attacker. I would imagine that they've probably either created accounts by stealing someone else's information, or maybe they're using like a mule account, right, where they find someone, get them to sign up to an exchange, pay them a little bit. But so what I do know is that the KYC details of the person that they found is not in the UK, right? They're off in some far-flung jurisdiction, which again makes pursuit very difficult. Yeah, so that's kind of where we are with it all. I suppose there's lots of wrinkles to it, but that's it in a broad sense.
Well, let's talk about the setup then, and what the way that you were set up, and what you would advise against doing and advise people to do going forward. So how did it happen? Like, obviously, there was the hack on your father's laptop. So what were they? How did they get in, and what were they looking for?
Well, again, I don't have any definitive answers, but I have, a leading theory, if that makes sense. So first of all, I'll just go over the setup really briefly, right? So people understand sort of how it might have happened. But first of all, I got a lot of flack on Twitter saying like, oh, I cannot believe you don't use hardware wallets, right? I need to put that to bed. We do have and use hardware wallets, right? But I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out there. Like, they're just signing devices, right? So we had hardware wallets and we understand how to use them. But obviously, you need to store a recovery phrase to your hardware wallet so that if you drop it down the toilet or whatever, or it gets damaged, that you can buy a new device, enter your seed phrase, and off you go again, right? So we had the challenge of storing these seed phrases. Now, what we did is we stored it. Oh God, I hate recounting this, but we stored it on a password manager, right? Now, again, before everyone goes crazy and goes, I can't believe you stored it with LastPass or some third party, we didn't. It was self-custody because we used an open source password manager called KeePass, which is self-hosted, right? So it's not run like a company like LastPass. We have the file, only we have the file, it only lives on our devices. And that file that contains a lot of passwords, including the passphrases, was encrypted with a passphrase, right? So that's where the seeds live. They're in a KeePass file. The KeePass file is encrypted with a passphrase. Now, obviously, the next problem with seed phrases that you've got to think about is, okay, that's well and good. And imagine that file lived on a device that didn't connect to the internet, right? In our case, it did. This was on my dad's daily driver laptop. But even if this was on a device not connected to the internet, I've still got the problem of the device might fail, the hard drive might go faulty or whatever. So, we need to find a way of backing this up so that we have multiple versions of this. Again, I hate recalling this, but the solution that we ended up with was it went into OneDrive. So this KeePass file now lives on my dad's laptop, and it also lives in his OneDrive file. So again,
what's
OneDrive is encrypted.
OneDrive? Sorry, just so people are.
So it's Microsoft Cloud storage.
Right.
Yeah. So it lives in the cloud basically, and as you'd expect, that cloud account is protected with a password as well. So the question is then, right, how on earth did they would have to break some of this encryption to get at anything, right? So let's start ruling things out. So number one, could they have got access to the file by accessing my dad's hardware, like the physical device? We think this is so seriously unlikely, just based on we know where he lives, we know who comes in and out of that house. None of them are technically capable. It's just really far-fetched to think that might be the case. So what we think was, okay, so we think that someone's breached either the OneDrive or my dad's device. So let's try and rule out the device to start with. So as I explained earlier in the call, my dad's been a developer for 50 odd years. So we're very confident that he's not going to have clicked any phishing links or anything like that, right? He's been around long enough that you're not going to catch him out with a silly email. So that, I think, leaves us with our OneDrive being compromised. And I think how this all happened is, I think they've brute forced the password. Potentially it could have been a keylogger on his device that saw him type in his passphrase. But given, as I've just said, I don't think he's clicking any phishing links. I think they've just brute forced his online account. The reason I think that's the most likely explanation is, after the fact, I found out that this passphrase just it's not strong enough, not by a long stretch, right? So, it's not got multiple special characters in it. It's not long enough. We're talking about a password that's, I think it was about 11 characters long. No special characters, that sort of thing. So from my understanding, someone could actually probably brute force that in, I don't know, I'm no expert, but certainly less than a month, maybe less than a week. And for all I know, it could have been just mere hours. And by that point, they've got the file. Really silly was the OneDrive password was actually the same as the KeePass file passphrase, which again, is something we'll kick ourselves forever. We do know better, that's the hardest thing about it. I've got to go out there, put my face out there and explain these really stupid mistakes that we made and be told over and over again how stupid those mistakes are. And it's funny because we already knew, and I can't really explain to you fully why we never, why, I'll play this over in my mind for the rest of my life. Why didn't we just have a secure password? Because look, storing all of that stuff on a cloud account is really stupid. Storing it on a laptop that's a daily driver and connects to the internet every day is really stupid. But the truth is, had that passphrase been really long and really complicated, they wouldn't have been able to break the encryption and we wouldn't be sitting in the situation we're in now. Now, that's not me advocating for having that setup, but that is the fatal flaw in our setup, is that passphrase was just terrible. So we assume that that's been brute forced. The other thing that I think is interesting about the attack is, do I think that some attacker is just going around breaking into as many OneDrive accounts as they can, and that this hacker just hit the jackpot, right? Needle in a haystack. Oh my God, here's seeds to 25 Bitcoin. Maybe I can't rule it out, but it seems unlikely. So one thing we learned from the authorities was that uh, we originally bought Bitcoin from Mt. Gox because it was the only exchange around back then. Now, because we understood we wanted to hold our money ourselves, we never lost it to the Mt. Gox hack. But now it seems quite obvious, and we never really considered it. But the attacker almost certainly made off with Mt. Gox's Bitcoin, but almost certainly also had access to all of Mt. Gox's data, which will have included KYC information. It would have had our names. It would have shown how much Bitcoin we'd bought. It would have showed where we sent that Bitcoin into our own self-custody. So it would have had our addresses. So what we discovered from the authorities is that our names and details have been attributed to those addresses that we sent the Bitcoin from Mt. Gox to for a long time. And then we also found out that a lot of our details have been circulating the dark web for quite a while. And we appear on lists that say things like Bitcoin owners, Bitcoin targets. You can actually, there's a tool in Google actually that you can use. I can't remember what it's called or how you find it, but if you're a Google user and you use Gmail and this sort of stuff, you can go and use their security tools, and you can actually go and Google, do my details appear on the dark web? And it will run off and go and find you. It's really quite surprising. Um, so again, I can't really prove any of this, and I'm speculating. It just seems like the most likely explanation is I think that it was known through some means or other that we held Bitcoin, and that we'd held it for a long time. There was a likelihood we had a lot. I think that perhaps someone's targeted us specifically because our details were leaked after Mt. Gox was hacked. And then I think they've got quite lucky in stumbling across the fact that, this cloud account, first of all, was attributed to my dad's email, which is publicly known. So the only thing they needed was the passphrase. And once they brute forced it, that's it. They're in, and that's all she wrote, I think.
Fucking hell, man.
Yeah.
Everyone's sitting there now shitting themselves, especially those that.
Well, yeah, I don't want to do that because I'm getting accused by some people like, oh, you're fudding everyone, you're going to scare away the normies. Like, how could we ever possibly pump our bags if we can't get everyone to buy in and that sort of stuff? And do you know what? That's the problem. That's a bit of a problem for me now, and I've got this new viewpoint, which is you can't just run around orange pilling people without explaining to them that if you want to be your own bank, right? And you want all these benefits of being your own bank, controlling your own money, privacy over transactions, all that stuff, then you can only have those benefits if you also take on the responsibilities that come with being your own bank. You know, it's funny now, I scroll through Twitter, I see all these tweets. All you've got to do is buy it, hold it. And yeah, that's relatively good advice, but the noise about green candles and price predictions and the macro podcasts drown out all of the great information about how do you actually do it, how do you use it. So yeah, it's difficult to explain, but I think it's easy. I think it's relatively easy to go about self-custody, but you do have to take it seriously. And don't forget, our storage just kind of stayed the same for 10 years. We didn't move on. So, we bought hardware devices, but we didn't go and get metal plates. We didn't go and take our seeds off of this online computer. So, a great piece of advice I'd give to people is like, don't stop training, right? You aren't finished. It isn't just buy it, hold it, and then Lambos. It's buy it, hold it, use it as a store of value, but also use it, practice with it, make mistakes with it, upgrade your setups. When new technology comes out, go and play with it, go and understand it, because things are going to continue to move on, and security setups, I would imagine, will continue to improve. We find all the time. Again, I don't remember this story that well, but there's definitely been wallets that have existed in the past that later we find out that the way the seeds or the private keys were generated was flawed, and that those wallets have subsequently been drained. Right? If you're not paying attention and you're not moving on and not staying current and up to date, you're going to open yourself up to this risk. But I don't want to scare people off. It's totally achievable. It's not rocket science. It just requires you to. I mean, this is the crazy thing. If you're holding $1 million worth of Bitcoin, just take it as seriously as you should, you know, and we'll be kicking ourselves forever for not doing that. And it's also important, I think, you know, one thing I'd really like to share as well is I would say that I personally feel that 90% plus of Bitcoiners probably haven't got their setups as good as they could. I think that's probably a fair estimate. The reason I say that is because everyone thinks it's hardware wallet, steel plate, done. And it's so much more than that. You know, I would imagine most Bitcoiners today, you know, probably haven't thought through enough about inheritance planning. They probably haven't thought about KYC and privacy enough. You know, like yourself, for example, Daniel, I don't know your setup. I don't want to know your setup, but you're obviously running a podcast. So you're an extremely public figure, right? I feel like we were definitely targeted because our KYC details were leaked. Now, I'm sure there might be some people who think, well, Daniel Prince has probably got a reasonable amount of Bitcoin. So I wonder if I can get into his cloud account. I wonder if I can do this, that, the other. So, you know, that's where I start. I've got a much stronger sort of distaste for KYC now, you know, and much more pro privacy now. I think people do need to be practicing with coin joins, understanding how to break the ties of where their money's gone. You know, other things like everyone's talking at the moment about UTXO consolidation because, you know, you for obvious reasons and the fees increasing. But, you know, if you've received Bitcoin payments from a load of people and then you consolidate, you might be revealing how much Bitcoin you own to anyone who'd sent you Bitcoin in those transactions. So you just got to keep going. You've got to keep going. We took our foot off the pedal. We got too comfortable. We were too relaxed. We were distracted off doing other things, and that's ultimately been our downfall.
Mm. Yes, I certainly do, and am aware of the fact that not just me or the other podcasters, everybody on Twitter that uses their own names, everybody that puts themselves out there to, you know, even the guys that are writing articles and books and doing the YouTube videos. Yeah, all classic easy targets. Going to a conference, another classic easy target. And that goes for everybody, right? Because, yeah, it's pretty weird what you said about, you know, there are these lists on the dark net where people are being profiled. Damn.
I mean, yeah, you know, here's the thing as well, Daniel. I want to put this out there, right? Like, there's a lot of people that will say, like, Bitcoin is this magic wand, right? And we're going to wave it. We're all going to get on a Bitcoin standard, and then there's going to be this beautiful, peaceful utopia that we live in. Now, I don't want to come on and sound like a total doomer. I'm a pretty positive guy generally, right? But I think we maybe go a bit far with that because, you know, yes, taking the money printer out of the hands of governments, they're the biggest perpetrators of you know, wrongdoing in the world. So removing their financing and their ways that they can perpetuate that will make the world fairer and better. But it's not going to make every single human on the planet suddenly be a good person. Do you know what I mean? So there are always going to be people who would rather relieve you of your wealth through stealing or, you know, skullduggery than go out and earn it. And I don't really see that that's going to change. So, you know, I don't say that as a sort of negative thing because I think a world on a Bitcoin standard probably would be more peaceful and more happy. But there are still going to exist people that would like to take your things from you, either by violence or by hacking you or whatever. And I think people should really take that really seriously. Like I've said in tweets before, you know, if you're sitting listening to the latest macro podcast and thinking about the ETFs and all this sort of stuff, but you don't know how to do a coin join, in my opinion, you're just putting things in the wrong order. You know, if you're listening to that macro podcast and you know you've got really good security, but the passphrase is in your head and your wife doesn't know it, and if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, it's all gone, then you shouldn't be listening to the macro podcast. You should be working on your inheritance planning. So those are the main takeaways I'd give. And the final thing is as well, you know, I was quite happy to look quite foolish and say, yeah, we saw our seeds online. That's really dumb. But I want people to understand, like, we've been around 10 years in this space. Like, we know a little bit about a little bit. You know, I've used sort of, I know what replaced by fee is. You know, we've used LN bits, made, you know, LN URL withdrawal codes at meetups so people could zap, you know, and get free Bitcoin. Like, we're pretty capable. I've done coin joins, I've used Sparrow Wallet, all this stuff. Um, I'm now, you know, more humble about like where my limits are, right? So I'm not a cybersecurity professional. That's obvious at this point. But a lot of Bitcoiners aren't, right? And the reality is that what you're protecting when you're protecting your seed is just critical data, right? So yes, it's Bitcoin and Bitcoin's new, but protecting critical data is not a new idea. So there are people out there with 30, 40 years experience in cybersecurity and how to protect critical data. And, you know, some of us, I genuinely think now need to rethink, well, maybe this is a service that we should go and pay for and get trained on and get assistance with. The analogy I'd give you is like, hey, look, if my radiator fell off the wall this afternoon and water starts gushing out all across my flat, I'm going to call a plumber. I could go on YouTube and watch some videos and try and figure it out myself, and that might be interesting and fun. But my flat is going to flood, right? So, you know, I'll call a plumber. Um, so this is why I'm really interested now in doing a little bit of work with the Bitcoin way. Is, you know, it suddenly seems so obvious to me that, you know, Tony who works there has got, you know, several decades of uh, cybersecurity experience. And, you know, yes, I really think Bitcoiners should go and learn this sort of stuff themselves and go and do the tutorials, go and do the videos on YouTube. But I think it would be crazy if you're like, if you work in marketing and now suddenly find yourself with a load of Bitcoin, maybe you've done loads of Bitcoin sessions videos, which are amazing, right? And you're pretty good with your seed signer and all this stuff, and you're pretty well set up. Go and speak to Tony at the Bitcoin Wave for just half an hour and just realize that there are so many attack surfaces that you almost certainly haven't considered, right? Like, I don't want to make people paranoid, but like, you know, your fridge is probably listening to you these days. Do you speak your passwords out loud? Do you have an Alexa in the house? All sorts of different attack vectors. And also the people around you and the people you know, if their security is not up to scratch, they could be the weak link in the chain. It's fascinating, man. You know, I'm looking at privacy phones, all this. I'm going to go really far with where I'm going to take my security now because I've had this crazy experience. But I would advise people go and seek professional help. Like, go and speak to Tony at the Bitcoin Way, right? Would be my advice. It's something I wish I'd have done. And I think people should start investing in that.
For sure. And I know why people are hesitant to do it, because they feel as though that's talking to a third party and they don't want to put trust into someone else and talk about their Bitcoin and give something up accidentally across a Zoom call or or whatever is being used. Yeah, there's lots of layers to it, man. What's
Well, what I would say about Tony, just so people are clear, right? The Bitcoin Way is not a company that's going to self-custody your Bitcoin. They're not interested in touching your Bitcoin. They don't want anything to do with it. It's almost like a boot camp, like a kind of a training camp, which is, you know, how are you set up now? And how do we get you to a place where you're far more secure? And they just walk you through it. And instead of, you know, yes, you could walk through it on YouTube tutorials, but you're always going to have that question in the back of your head, which is, did I miss anything? Am I super 100% confident? You may well get it completely right and it's perfect. And then you give Tony at the Bitcoin Way a call and he kind of says, well, there's not much I can do to help you because you've kind of gone as far as you need to go. But for anyone who's not 100% sure, you know, I doubt Tony's interested in how much Bitcoin you own. And I'm pretty sure that if you wanted to join a call, you know, with a throwaway email address and a frog avatar, he's still going to talk to you and try and help you out. So you can go there and you can get a second opinion on your setup if you just want to check that it is as good as it can be. And he can also just help you. It's like having a Sherpa that can take you up the mountain, because there's levels, you know, there's, well, let's get you the hardware wallet and a steel plate, right? Once we've got you there, how much further do you want to go? What's right for you, right? So um, you want to learn coin joins, they can help you start understanding how you do that and how you improve privacy. You want to start buying Bitcoin, but you don't want to use a KYC exchange. They'll help you walk through and understand the options and how to do it. You know, maybe you want to upgrade to like multi-signature, which, by the way, the more you increase complexity, for anyone listening, the more chance you increase user error. So if you're going to go with a complex setup that's very secure but a little bit complex, it's maybe a good idea to have someone like Tony on your side who can just walk you through it and make sure you don't make any irrevocable uh, mistakes. I mean, look, you know, I'm probably hitting this home a bit thick, but you know, I've been a business owner for a few times in my life, and hey, look, I hire a cybersecurity team to set up our systems and make sure they're secure, because it's not my skill set. So I think Bitcoiners should be doing two things. They should be training themselves, but also should not be scared of hiring a coach. You know, like I like playing golf. When I want to improve my golf, I go and hire a coach. If I wanted to get better at swimming, I'll go and find someone. You can teach yourself, but it's going to take you longer. And you want to get secure before you get hilariously rich, not afterwards, like in my case.
What what's the way? I mean, it seems to me that you've kind of come to terms with it, gone through the 5, 6, 7 stages of grief, whatever. What's
Mm.
the plan for you now going forward? I mean, you clearly want to get back to stacking you as quick as you can. What's what's the next year looking like for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, man, you know, I try and put positivity out there because that's the right thing to do, right? You reach a fork in the road like this, and you've got two options. Option one is get out, dust yourself off, and carry on. It's a long race. Or option two is just let it defeat you, and then you become sort of some sort of black hole of misery and despair. And I'm not going to put my family through that, right? Like, because if I become this black hole of despair, it's going to affect all the people around me. It's going to suck them in and suck them down, and that's just not the right path to go down. Um, and maybe I'm just lucky, right? Like I've held through like three bear markets. I don't think. Yeah, I think that's hardened me to a certain extent. Like I've seen, you know, okay, paper net worth, but I've seen that jump up and down like crazy. Um, so maybe that's made me a bit more able to deal with it. But the other thing is like I'm conscious of just how early I am, right? Like it's funny, every cycle, right? And I've learned the hard way. Every cycle, I thought this is the cycle where all the shit coins die, everyone figures out Bitcoin, we dump the dollar and all this sort of stuff. And I think the reality is we're nowhere near that at the moment, right? Because when I go and speak to people outside of our bubble, they have no idea what I'm talking about, like
Hmm.
none whatsoever, right? Um, so yeah, it's going to be a long race, and the dollar isn't going to die that quick. You know, I think we should be careful not to underestimate our enemy here. You know, what sort of jiggery pokery goes on when the ETFs come out, I don't know, but I'm expecting some. So look, yes, a lot of people think, God, Rick, so you're going to go, well, the people who aren't Bitcoiners go, Rick, you're buying more Bitcoin, you're still going to use that as your money? The answer is yes. I mean, I got completely wiped out, but what am I going to do? Like build my house on sand and start trying to save in pounds or dollars? Like that's crazy, right? Like that's totally illogical. So in terms of what's coming next, man, well, yeah, doing a little bit of work with the Bitcoin way. I'll keep talking to anyone who will listen about, you know, get your security sorted. You really don't want to experience this. Um, and yeah, me and my dad actually getting quite close with this Lightning app that we're working on. By the way, I'm going to put this out there because everyone thinks it's some crazy marketing scheme that I've come up with. We don't actually really have any intention of making any money out of it. We just think it's kind of cool and that the community might like it. And maybe there's a little bit of us wanting to just scrape back a little bit of our pride and say, no, we can do some useful things too. Um, but on a grander scale, I will remain a psychopath. I've understood Bitcoin. I know what it means. I know there's no alternative. I have to build a new stack. I will be completely changing all of my hardware, all of my devices. So we're talking like privacy phones. I'm no expert yet, right? So, but running our own servers, improving just our internet security in general. I'm going to be moving to a jurisdiction where you can own firearms. Yeah, like part of the reason that I was going and doing woodworking is I'd had my Bitcoin, then I was going to learn a bit of woodworking, a bit of plumbing, a bit of I was going to do some electrician's courses. Like I'm trying to make myself as capable as possible because I think the future looks pretty dicey. So I'm going to continue down that road. I want to be self-sovereign. This wasn't just about paper gains. I didn't want a Lambo. I still don't want a Lambo. I just want my freedom. And you better believe I'm going to get it. So I couldn't tell you what's next. I'm still reeling a little bit, as you can imagine. But yeah, I probably need to save woodworking for my retirement now and knock that on the head because I can make some pretty nice dovetail joints now, Daniel, but you wouldn't want me around your house fixing stuff because I'm not that good yet. So I have to go back into sort of maybe marketing, sales. I'd love that to stay in the Bitcoin world because, I've been doing talks for years. I think I have some value to offer people. So yeah, I don't know, but watch this space. I'll try and drop that Lightning app while I can. I'll try and teach as many people not to make the mistakes we made. And then maybe when I get back on my feet, I'm very interested in my privacy now. So you might well see in a couple of years that I just disappear. And you might go, God, do you remember that guy who lost that 25 Bitcoin? I wonder what he's doing now. Yeah, that's the rough plan. It's not a great plan yet, but we'll get there.
And what's the best case scenario? Obviously, worst case scenario, you've lost the Bitcoin, they're not coming back. What's the best case scenario for you in the next 6 to 9 months if the authorities get back in touch? That must go through your mind as well.
Yeah, I mean they're still working on it. They're still working on it. So, there are funds on various exchanges that might or might not be ours. Um, I don't want to go into it too much. Like some stuff has been frozen. It's not it's nowhere near 25 Bitcoin worth of funds has been frozen, right? So we're talking very, very small amounts. But I want to see that through because I just have to see the end of this story, right? I have to get to the full final conclusion. My hopes for whether that we'll see any justice and they'll catch the attacker, I think, are probably pretty slim. Um, but it won't be quickly forgotten, right? If I find myself on a decent war chest again and I have some resources, I might have a little look for this person if I can. But also, I don't want to get stuck in the past. I don't know if you remember that story of the guy who threw his hard drive away in the dump.
Mm.
Do you remember that?
Yep.
Yeah, that taught me something because every 2 years over the last 10 years, every 2 or 3 years, he reemerges, right? And he's back talking to the council, desperate to get this Bitcoin back. And I don't want to become like that person. I don't want to have a dig or whatever, but he went when it was worth 20 million, then it's worth 100 million, and he keeps going back. And then he gets VC funding. They'll say, we'll pay for it and split the winnings if we find it. And I'm just like, I couldn't do that because it seems like it's consumed him a little bit. He's still thinking about it. I'm probably likely to write off, we're talking like 99% of these funds are definitely gone. One interesting thing for your listeners, and I don't know how I feel about this, but I'm going to put it out there anyway, is yeah, Monero, right? Like I'm pretty the most anti-shitcoin person you could find, right? But one thing I learned through this process was some of the funds got flipped into Monero. And as far as I can tell from, the authorities, once it goes into Monero, forget it. You're not going to find it. Now, look, I would never hold Monero. As I understand it, you can't verify the total supply. So, not interested in using that as my money. But as someone who's been so vehemently anti these alternative coins, and still am, by the way, it makes you think like maybe it's not an investment, but maybe it's a useful tool. You know, I don't know what to make of that. I'm just putting it out there because like it seems like once the funds went into Monero, the trail goes cold. So people can make of that what they will. I think it's quite interesting. Would I maybe consider in future, say I had one Bitcoin and I felt like it was KYC'd and everyone knew who owned it. Would I jump into Monero for 5 minutes if I knew I could jump straight back out and still have my Bitcoin, but no one else knew where it was? I don't know. Maybe there's smarter people than me in the comments, and the hardcore maxis will come for me. I would consider myself a maxi, by the way, but maybe they'll come for me and tell me that's crazy because I don't know enough. But yeah, it's an interesting thought, eh?
Yeah, and I'm just wondering how you do that without actually using a KYC'd exchange, because you'd have to switch the Bitcoin into Monero and then from back out to Monero, back into Bitcoin, and then back into a wallet. So it seems it's not like you're doing that peer to peer down the pub with your mate Dave, right? Like that's not happening. Or
No,
is
but there are venues where you can exchange non-KYC. There's quite a lot of like what are they called, dexes? So these decentralized exchanges and stuff like that. Like I think I've got this right, so don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure fixed float is non-KYC. So I think you can deposit funds there, probably switch into Monero and stuff like that. But there are venues that offer it for sure.
hmm. All right, man. Okay, so I think we've done this one justice enough. But for those listening that haven't even got to the point of getting themselves a hardware wallet yet, or a signing device, whatever you want to call it, that has to be like the next step. And this is something I pound the table about, and I know other Bitcoin podcasters do as well, about self custody and taking it very seriously and buying a wallet direct from the vendor. Don't go to a third party. Don't use Amazon, any third party retailer. Get it directly from the website. Triple check you're on the actual right website, or even better, get one from an event direct from the people that are there at the booth, to make sure, because then you're not even giving up your address, right? That's got to be
So that's another thing I
the
did is,
next.
yeah, I use a PO box now. So like now that I've come back and I'm assessing the situation, now none of my post goes to my house. It all goes to a PO box. When I rebuild my stack, you best believe I'm not using a KYC exchange. It was using a KYC exchange and those details being leaked that probably led the hackers to come after us. I'm not sending anything to my home address, not using KYC. I'm going to be coin joining and learning how that works. Because again, think of yourself, Daniel, right? Imagine I found out one of your addresses. If I see that the next transaction you made was a coin join, if I'm an attacker, I'm looking for low hanging fruit. So I'm probably thinking, oh, this is going to be difficult to track. I'm going to give up. So yeah, I'm going to be going a lot further. We're talking like, running nodes, your own servers, privacy phones, and learning all these coin joins, because I think 90% plus of Bitcoiners are buying on a KYC exchange. They're sending it to, a hardware wallet. They're probably putting their seeds on metal and probably stopping there. And that's pretty good. It's pretty good. But there's
Actually,
more. Go
I
further.
think you're probably overestimating how many people are doing that.
Yeah, yeah, even that far.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and KYC is the illicit activity. Like this does not help people. It doesn't serve people. You might have thought that because I was hacked, I'd be pro KYC because then we can catch the robber. Like, no, privacy is the fundamental right. If you're not thinking about privacy and you're not coin joining and you're using a KYC exchange, look for alternatives because A, it's interesting, B, you'll get some more skills. And if your details are in a database somewhere, it's not if, it's when they get leaked. So, if your stack is sitting there, try and break any connections to the KYC exchange that you bought it. And there's tools out there that can help you do it, especially people like ourselves, Daniel, who are public. There's loads of public Bitcoiners. And I'm just like, whoa, guys, we need to really think this through.
Mm. Certainly do. And there's a lot of people out there that this has been an uncomfortable interview, I'm sure, but with good reason, because you got to start taking it seriously and you got to start thinking about it. And for those people that perhaps have legacy stacks that were linked to KYC, it's another thought step again. Do you have them on a safe cold storage device, but they are KYC'd from 6 years ago? Is that exchange still around even? A lot of them have gone, right? What does that mean? What are the implications of that? Does that mean that data is gone, or is it still somewhere and somebody can buy that data from the previous business owner? Like, who knows? Who knows what's going on out there?
Even employees. How do you know that an exchange isn't going to have a rogue employee who thinks, oh, I could just get this data and sell it on the dark web and make a quick buck? Um, it's kind of wild when you get into all the different attack vectors. And you're right. People need to be taking it more seriously. I don't want to be a doomer, but I really don't want this to happen to anybody else, because like I have good days and bad days, right? Some days I'm really quite pissed off because I can't really explain to you what it's like. I had a lot of plans for what I was going to do next, and that those funds were going to unlock a lot of opportunities for me. You need to understand, these people stole they stole my kids' inheritance, right? This is the point, right? I want to make it as serious as I can, right? This is the sort of stuff that, look, I'm a pretty resilient individual, but this is the sort of stuff that I can imagine. I've heard the stories. People throw themselves off bridges when stuff like this happens, right? That's the reality of the situation. Um, I'm not wired that way, but look, you have to avoid this situation. And yes, a hardware wallet and a steel plate's pretty good, but there's too many sort of wannabe advisors out there who have been in Bitcoin for 3 or 4 years and know how to use a hardware wallet. That's great, and they have value to add, and they can help teach others to get to that stage. But they're not cybersecurity professionals. And we have to approach this like, again, it's like, if the bank, for example, will outsource all of their security. If we're Bitcoiners, we're trying to be our own bank. Now, I'm not saying outsource your security, but go and find experts that can make sure you don't really cock this up like we did. Okay, you're going to make a little bit of investment, you're going to pay an expert for their time, but well, look, the Bitcoin Way's pricing, if you ask me, when I heard about it, I thought, oh God, that seems a bit cheap. If I was a consultant to their business, I might say to them, oh, do you know what? I think you should maybe be charging a higher hourly rate than that, because this is a real expertise that you have. But don't leave it. The other thing, I'm a Bitcoiner, I get it. You think, well, I don't want to spend any Bitcoin on improving my security now, because if I wait 6 months, it'll be worth 10 times the amount. Yeah. Well, guess what? If you look at your address and it says nil point, right, then you'll wish you spent the money like I did. So yeah, KYC is a problem. All of this stuff's a problem, and you've got to learn it. Just start learning it and go and find someone who can teach you.
All right, mate. Last question. If you had one last orange pill left to give to somebody, who would you give it to and why?
Oh wow. Yeah, good question. I mean, I would never choose any politicians. The reason is, for the entirety of my life, politicians have done nothing for me, and I don't trust them. Right? I know. We can look at El Salvador and maybe even Argentina, but hey, look, even if they say the right things, I still don't trust them. So I'll steer away from politics altogether. Who would I orange pill? Do you know what? I'm just going to pick someone that's maybe a bit specific to me, but like I'd probably choose someone like, I really like. Do you know the rapper Kano?
No.
Okay, so he's like a British grime artist, right? I've listened to him for years and years and years. And he's got a brilliant way with words. Like he's a really talented sort of lyricist, and I'd be really interested to hear him make a song about it, right? I think actually, if we orange pill a few entertainers and stuff like that, I think we can reach more people, because as interesting as all of us little psychopaths find, talking about the Federal Reserve and, the creature from Jekyll Island and all this sort of stuff, a lot of people probably just prefer music. So if we make Bitcoin kind of cool and kind of interesting and desirable, it might be a more effective method. So yeah, I'd probably go for him.
All right, man. Well, appreciate you coming on. How can people reach out to you if they want to carry on the conversation anyway?
Yeah. Oh, well, one thing I say, like, just reach me out on Twitter. So if you've, I'm not a cybersecurity expert. I'm not trying to pretend to be one, but I know a little bit about a little bit, and I've thought a lot about it over the last couple of months. So if people want to DM me, I'll happily have a chat. Another thing I'll mention as well is I've had a lot of people get in touch with me because they've been hacked as well, either in the past or recently. And they're upset, and I know that like talking to someone can really really help. So like, if you're in a tough spot and you're going through it and you're not quite sure how you get past it, just I'll talk to you, right? Like I'll happily give up some time and jump on a call with you and try and help. Like recently, a guy lost 4 Bitcoin, got in touch. Yeah, and we had a decent chat and hopefully put him on the right direction. And do you know what? I'll go as far as to say, despite being a sort of Bitcoin maxi, even if you're a shitcoiner and someone stole all of your Ethereum or your Anal OS coin or Pepe the Frog coin, I don't really care, right? Like if you're having a hard time because someone stole a load of stuff from you and you're not sure how you're going to get over it, then give me a call, and I'll be happy to help. And finally, I would say like if you want to know more about the Bitcoin way and what they do and how they might help you avoid the situation I'm in, you can pick my brain about that, or I can introduce you to the guys over there. You can jump on a call with them for free for 30 minutes and just pick their brain and make your own mind up if you think they're going to help you or not. But yeah. I'll be around for a little while. I'll tell the story. I'll start stacking again, and then I'll ride off into the sunset when I get myself sorted.
All right. Thanks, Rick. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing, and all the best, man.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Daniel. Like, I really appreciate it, man. Really, really good. Thanks.
Take care.
All right.